Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this legal compliance webinar series run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. These webinar series are focusing on COVID legal compliance obligations and are really designed to give you in your agencies the skills and knowledge about some of your key compliance obligations. These webinars have been run since February 2020 and are being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. We welcome everyone joining us from around Australia today, and these resources, once we finish this webinar, will also be circulated to all attendees joining us today. So I do thank you and welcome you to today's session. The webinar that we're running this particular series on is at the moment focusing on long COVID. This is something that is fairly new. It is something that government departments and employers are still trying to work out and set specific policies requirements for. It is, though, from what we can see from public health directives, from literature based overseas as well too, especially within the epidemiological and public health space, that long COVID is something that governments and agencies truly around the world are actually starting to investigate and see how and what employers need to do. What we are finding in 2022, unlike in the previous couple of years, is that there is more obligations in a compliance and HR perspective placed on employers to manage long COVID and COVID across for staff, clients, and visitors that may access your agency. So what does this actually mean, and what are the compliance obligations that your agency really needs to consider? Last week, we spoke about long COVID, and I'm going to just build off these slides and then look at what are some of the workplace forms and tools that agencies are using to, in fact, manage their HR obligations, but also their public health requirements under their legal compliance obligations within their agencies. So we looked at what long COVID is. We looked at what are some of the legal management arrangements that you need to consider. And also, where, as always, we're going to look at what other agencies are doing to make things easier from a compliance perspective. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's jump directly to the recommendations. First of all, we recommend that you set up your business COVID safe screening forms for clients, staff, and visitors and contractors. These are things that you should have in place, if not already, and also continue to review from time to time as well too. What this will do is essentially assist you to avoid any work health and safety penalties, but also assist you to manage your work health and safety obligations. There is a positive obligation on all agencies to what is reasonably required to minimize as much as possible COVID within the workplace. And this does cover your clients, your staff being your personnel. So if you have volunteers, it will include volunteers as well too. And also contractors that you may have visit your agencies or provide services to from your agencies as well too. If you do have any questions around this, then we encourage you to reach out to us on either my mobile, which has been available on Google since February last in 2020, and that's listed here, as well as our 1300 number, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com. So let's just go back. Firstly, when we look at what long COVID actually is, what we are finding now is that many people are experiencing health difficulties for several months after they've been infected with COVID-19. There is work underway to make sure that healthcare staff have more information about the longer term effects of COVID-19 and how to look after clients safely. If we go and visit even other government websites, for example, you can actually see that there is information about long COVID, and you'll start to see this pop up across the board. So on, for example, the Victorian Department of Health, the COVID website, and this is similar in other states, which is being updated. Again, you'll find that long COVID is now starting to come to the forefront of people's minds. And so it is defined here as long COVID is the name given to the symptoms some people experience for weeks or months after their initial COVID infection. It is also known as post-acute COVID-19, although some people will continue to have symptoms. The actual symptoms may vary from person to person, and long COVID symptoms can occur in people who were never unwell with their COVID-19 infection. So what we're actually seeing is that there's a whole range of potential symptoms that people might have post actually being infected with COVID itself. And these symptoms are actually quite similar to what you might find with the symptoms being initially screened for as well too. Now, why we are talking about this at this time as well too is that for employers, we're finding now that these obligations are now being pushed onto employers to in fact manage. So when we look at this, what does it mean for yourselves around this? What does it mean? What are your compliance obligations? How do you screen for this? How do you in fact manage this in an effective way? Now, one of the things that we're really going to talk about today is screening. Screening by far is one of the most important tools that your agency can use in terms of managing its workforce, and also looking at, as we're seeing in other countries as well too, policy directives now coming up around the management of long COVID-19 sickness and also absences as well. And we're finding, especially while you might have your COVID safe systems in place, one of the things that I'll talk about today is around effective screening of your clients, your visitors, and your personnel. And today we're going to focus on this side of it. We're also going to be looking at screening work health and safety obligations as well too, coming out of Fair Work, and how do you in fact manage this. So there are some agencies that I've spoken with even this morning that are actually pushing people back to actually working remotely. And this is something that you'll find in 2022. There may be these cycles where people are essentially either working from, working from their work sites, or maybe working remotely from their homes. So what does this mean from a legal compliance perspective? Well, essentially what you need to do from a employer compliance point of view is to ensure that your staff, clients, and personnel are kept safe. Now, this is something that is pushed under work health and safety legislation. It is something that is also included as part of the public health directives. Now, essentially on your GEMBA dashboard, and I'm going to focus on this for a little while this morning, this is your legal compliance dashboard. If you don't have access at the moment to this, you should have got access over the last couple of weeks for those of you that have joined us recently, but we will open these up for you, and you will have access to these resources today to view these. So it's quite simply, you can go to gemba360.com. It'll bring up this big blue circle, and you will be given your username, which is usually your email address, and a temporary password that you can log into. From here, you'll open up, and this is just our test demo site that we use for demonstration purposes. Now, what we're going to focus on is firstly looking at screening of clients, personnel, and visitors. And then we're going to look at some of the work health and safety forms that have actually come out of Fair Work, and how do you manage this effectively for your agency. So first of all, one of the obligations that we've spoken about previously in last week's webinar was to look at screening your clients and visitors attending your agency. I've seen this specifically for aged care services and other housing registrar housing providers, where they've had to actually go in, and before people are actually coming onto their site, they're essentially screening their clients and visitors. Now, we have, and this is more than, I can see a question has come up, this is more than the government's QR code check-in. This is essentially a tool that's being used to manage all of your clients that you're essentially coming in, or visitors that are actually coming in to your agency. And this is important because when we're talking of clients, essentially what we're looking at here is people that are either coming in to visit your agency, and they could be partially vaccinated, they could be exempt, they could be not vaccinated, they could be even possibly COVID positive with the number of cases that we're seeing around the country. They could be what we might call fully vaxxed if they've got 2 jabs, or now that there's the booster shot as well too, and I'm sure there will be questions on that, that means that fully vaccinated might be 3 jabs. And you want to be able to collect and screen people. The same thing goes if you're running group sessions, of course. So essentially you're going to have these clients that are coming in, or visitors that are assisting clients as well too coming in. So if you work at, for example, running aged care services, which a number of you that are joining us are, and you're running group classes, or you're even visiting a client as well too into their homes, you're wanting to screen clients effectively to ensure that you're able to enter into or have a safe environment and manage COVID effectively. So with it, what we have set up for agencies, and just going through this just to show you what the next step is, essentially, and you can do this with me if you like as well too. So essentially, this is separate to the government department's QR code check-in. It's about screening clients, and I'll check it and I'll say it separately. This is about screening clients to see if they've got any symptoms. What we're finding is that agencies have said, while the focus has been on rat tests over the last couple of weeks, the problem is that people are now having access issues in actually acquiring these. What we have seen is that different government departments around the country have actually set up things like attestation documents, and really it's there to screen people. It's a screening tool. So if you go in and visit GPs, for example, they might check your temperature, but they'll also ask you, do you have any of these symptoms? So if you use your phone and on your screen, you can click on this here. What this will bring up is this form here. And you can see it's a screening tool. It's a form that we've linked up, and it's a 2-step form. So essentially what we're seeing here is this form, and I'm just going to make the screen slightly bigger for us. Here we are here. It's a client screening tool that people will have. We can rename it, and you can rename it anything you like. So what it's going to ask me is, what's my name? Okay, so I'm just going to put up my name here. I'm going to add in, let's say I'm visiting your agency, so I'm going to add in my phone number. You can do the same thing if you like. And then it's going to essentially ask me a series of questions. Now, this is something we set up. You can see we've set it up as another agency called Maroma in South Australia, a similar form that they use. But other agencies like religious groups, like the Rock Hosanna group in New South Wales also use this. We've got Queensland groups, even South Australia, and also Western Australia groups as well too. Right around the country use a similar form to this. And I'll show you how this works. Now, essentially what we're doing is asking the questions, do you have or have you had COVID-19? Have you been in close contact with any person, or do you have any of these symptoms? Now, these are the key symptoms that people are screening for COVID. Now, in this case, at the moment, I can tick on no. Now, if I tick yes, what will happen is that, and I'll show you the alert process in a minute, and where this form actually goes. But for now, I'm going to tick no. Now, is anyone attending with you? Now, in this case, I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to say Barney, Rubble, as well as Ruby and Lynette are also attending with me as well too. So I can put in those people's names. Now, you can see it's a form here, and I'm going to simply click on submit. Now, what happens here, I get a thank you for completing this form message. It's coming from a demo group called ABCDE Community Service. And I can, if I wanted to, it's got my contact number, and I can click on submit another form, and it's back to where I started again. So some agencies have actually put this onto an iPad, for example, with a cleaning cloth afterwards, and people can actually complete it. We've had other agencies that have either put this form on their Facebook page or sent it out to people to complete in advance of them coming in. Now, where does this go and what happens to it? Now, from a end user point of view, being a client or a visitor, all I really want to know is that I've completed this form. Now, what does happen around this is that essentially it goes back into my Gemba dashboard. Now, the difference here on this is that I can go into my COVID safe, should I say, COVID safe contact tracing button. And when I do that, I can see here we are here. Here's the form that I've just completed and who actually was that completed it. And so I'm logging in now under the dashboard. I've got the date and the time, so I didn't need to submit that on the form, and I can actually go in and complete this. Now, what happens here is that if I marked yes to this question, then essentially if you're running this dashboard, then in this case, Fred would have got an automatic email to say, hey, look, someone has actually marked this form as yes, and Fred will actually get an automatic alert by email to say, hey, look, someone's actually answered yes to this question. And it means then, and I can mark this now as completed, it means then that I've actually reviewed and completed this form as well. So what this allows going through this is that we've had very tough screening requirements for agencies going over the last couple of years. There are some agencies that have a handful of staff, might only be 2 or 3 people that actually run, but they have a lot of client programs. But this is the client-facing side of it. So you can actually screen your clients before they actually come in, and visitors as well too, and actually have it based so that way you're checking to see if anybody has any COVID symptoms. It has been for many housing providers, many group providers, disability service providers over the last couple of years, one of the most effective tools that they've used. Essentially, it is the same questions that you might get asked when going in and speaking to GP services. It's the same questions that other healthcare providers do ask, but essentially what it gives you is a very quick response to be able to ask questions of people as well too. Some people have also added in the vaccination status question around it as well too, and that's something else that is an option for you as well. We do suggest that you may also need to update your privacy policy if you decide to do that. Now, going back to our slides, what it means is that I can then very quickly look at, well, is any of my clients at risk or are at risk? Is it something, if someone marks yes, that they've actually got COVID positive symptoms before coming in, we can actually very quickly either contact them or reach out to them to give them further supports that they may need as well too. It also means that if some person is exempt as well too, or not vaccinated, for example, then we may also want to have other supports that either we provide to those people, or some agencies have said, look, we're not in a position to actually support you for a number of reasons around this. So especially in the not-for-profit space, this is something that is discussed quite regularly. And it might be that your agency needs to consider, well, are you in the position to actually provide these necessary supports to different client groups? But it is something that really allows you to very quickly screen your clients and visitors of this. Now, we do have a question on this where people have said, can we have multiple codes for different sites? So if we have different clients that are visiting different sites or visitors for different sites, are we able to actually access different forms that we can then use? And look, the answer is absolutely categorically yes, you can certainly do that. And just to show you an example of one agency that has done this as well too, which I can show you, is the Ukrainian Youth Association as well. And if we log into their dashboard, similar to what I've just shown you, they've got under their contact tracing, COVID safe contact tracing button, they've got 2 different forms here. It's the same form. One's a check-in and one's a check-out. But again, it gives you the idea that you can have, for multiple sites, however many sites you have, different forms that people can access in terms of accessing this information from as well too. And this was something that the Ukrainian Youth Association actually used for their school camp as well. So it gives you a range of different tools in order to manage this. Now, when we're looking at this specific requirement, again, what we're actually seeing is the requirement under work health and safety to ensure that you provide a safe environment to clients and visitors that you are in fact having to your different site. We've also got agencies like migrant resource centers that are also using similar forms to actually assess clients before going out to actually undertake outreach work as well. And again, staff are actually being given the form, they can complete it, and then automatically then go in and see the client. So there's some variations that you can see in using this form. Now, as part of this, the other things that we do see on here is looking at screening for personnel. And this has been one, whether you're running a cafe, whether you're running a aged care or health service or outreach work service or migrant resource center or a housing provider as well too. Again, one of the things that agencies are looking at is how can we actually assess and support our staff. Now, when we're looking at long COVID, one of the issues that you do need to consider is do our staff have any either COVID symptoms? Is there a need to provide EAP support and the likes for some instances? And so agencies are basing it on utilizing what we call the departments or government departments in some states attestation document. Now, where this in fact came from, if I just show you on these slides, where this in fact came from was basically in a number of states. We've seen what we call daily attestation documents, and many of you would have actually seen me talk about this previously. Now, the Attestation Register essentially is a statutory declaration that people complete or personnel complete. We're seeing this in the health and aged care sector, and also in some migrant resource centres where people are providing health, I'll say broad health services. An idea is that the attestation documents is in addition to the different government departments' QR code. Essentially, the attestation is to screen personnel in the same way that you're doing the screening for your visitors and clients. And what we have here, if I bring these up, of what this actually looked like, you'll find this located on your dashboard, and it's called the COVID-19 Daily Assessment Form. And this is just an example of one that we've placed on here. Now, essentially, this form may vary depending on where your agency is based. Now, you'll find that we've got, for example, outbreak locations and links, and it'll actually take you to your own state department site and references. So what we're actually screening for here is the purpose of the screening is to support staff and personnel. So it will automatically have the person's first name. When you log in, it'll have your name. It'll have the date and the time that the form is being completed. So if you are based, for example, in far north Queensland or joining us from WA today, if you log into your dashboard, it'll show your date and time based on where you are located. Now, what it does ask for is a few other questions. So asks if you've been in contact with a COVID-19 case, but also then goes into some of the specific requirements under the symptoms. Now, unlike for clients, what we have put in here is individual yes or no questions. Now, there is a reason why we have done this for personnel. Now, generally people will go in, and if they don't have any symptoms, they'll simply say no to each of these. You'll see that I've actually just clicking on these as we go through. Now, if, for example, let's say somebody turns around and actually puts in that they've actually got body aches and they mark that as a yes. And let's say they're also marked that they've got not increased, that they have also increased tiredness. Now, with that, we do have the space to actually add comments to it. Now, in this case, we can say, I have increased tiredness and body aches because I was up all night with my kids who did not go to sleep till 1 a.m. Exclamation mark, a couple of times. So there is the potential to actually add in a description of what has happened and why that is the case as well too. Now, once this form gets submitted, it'll then go back to Fred. And if I put this in here, okay, it'll come up, and Fred was the one who's completed it as a demo. But essentially, it'll then fire off an email to Fred, in this case, who's the HR and compliance manager, to essentially say, hey, look, there is a yes that's been marked. You need to go in and look at it. But essentially, once Fred goes in, and you can see the names come up, and let me go back to the assessment form, COVID daily assessment form, just went into the contact tracing one. So I can have a look at this one here, and I can then go in. So you get the idea of what the purpose of this form actually is. So essentially what it's doing is screening your personnel, and from this you're able to then meet your work health and safety obligations of ensuring that your visitors are kept safe, your contractors that are visiting, if they're coming in for long durations, are also kept safe, and also your personnel are kept safe as well too. And if they do have any of the potential symptoms, that you're managing this effectively as well. Now, what you will also see as well too is that we've got a couple of other forms on here, and they're called Workstation Assessment and Working from Home form. And these are a couple of the forms. And again, we've taken this information directly from Fair Work around these. And there are two different forms that we've got. So with these, where the Fair Work work forms are coming in, is that you can see that there are specific requirements that Fair Work essentially require agencies to manage. And you do have an obligation to ensure a safe work environment, even where people are working from home. So what we're finding is that when we look at things, a lot of the assessment is done on how can you ensure that the workstations where people are actually working from are adequate for what they're actually doing. And that's what this workstation assessment is for. So if I click on this, we have a workstation assessment, and when people are actually working from home, essentially it is a similar form to what you would have within your office. And again, people can actually complete it. So if Fred's working from home, I can get Fred to complete his workstation assessment form. It'll record the date and the time that Fred's actually done it. So if there is something that comes up, so things like work chair or keyboard, or if there are breaks and accessories that they're using, and we know that over the last couple of years, people are either working from all different locations. So really, as part of the employer, you want to make sure that people are working and have a space to work at from home around this. And whether people then decide to go and work at other places around this, then that's up to them. But essentially, as an employer, you've managed your obligations to what is called what is reasonable within this. And so essentially, it's a very quick question around this. Yes, no, or not applicable, and people can complete this. So you've got those audit requirements that are essentially there. So from here, what we've got is the specific tools around screening clients and visitors, as well as personnel for COVID symptoms. What we've also got is the workstation assessment form as well. And the last thing that we've also got is around the vaccination registers. Now, the vaccination registers is something that people have asked us a lot of questions on. So essentially what we do have under the HR module, which you can then view, and I'll just go back and log into this for you. So essentially what you've got is under, if I click on the HR module, thank you, here we are. And what we're going to do is go into, in this case, my info. Now, the HR space is where you can actually load in people's individual vaccination information. And this will actually then send you out the reminders of when the next either booster shots are due or how long that duration is. Because essentially what you do need to consider from a HR perspective is if somebody has had the vaccination, or let's say people have not had it for any reasons, then essentially you need to look at, well, how are you going to manage this information? And if other agencies send you their vaccination information, how are you actually going to manage this information from your agency's perspective? So generally you'll have the date that the vaccination was given, and then you'll have a nominated period of time. It might be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months or the likes. So once this comes up, what you can then do, if I click on this and go into the vaccination space, and you can see that now comes up with Fred's profile on the left-hand side. And what I'm going to do is just go into this space here, and we've just put it under license, and I'll show you why around this. The license name is not a license or vaccination license. It's essentially as a reminder around this. So where we've placed this is in the same spot that we've put things like police checks and working with children checks, which you can also load in here. Now, if I select add, what it'll give me is, you can see here that I've also put in the date of when the vaccination occurred and when the reminder is for it as well. And we've also got the same spot that we put in a person's police check and working with children check. So essentially 90 days before this date then comes up, it'll then send out the person a reminder by email automatically that says, hey, look, you need to update your information. It also means then that I can then also add in the certificate if you like as well too, and you then can run your reports as you need to. So essentially what you've then got within this space is the screening tools to manage your clients and contractors, and you've got the screening tools to manage all of your personnel, whether they're coming on site or delivering services through the COVID assessment form. You've also got the Workstation Assessment form if people are working from home. And again, this is based on fair work requirements as well. And you've also got your vaccination information that you can load in. So these 4 forms allow you to very quickly manage all of this information across the board. And we've had, in terms of case studies, agencies like Rumbalara Aboriginal Cooperative that actually started using some of these forms back in February 2020, and they employ some 3,300 odd staff. In some program areas, they might have 30, 40 staff working, but essentially they're able to actually go back and actually have a look at a lot of this information of what I'm talking about already. And while they might have 30 or 40,000 entries now, as you can imagine with such a large staff group, they're actually very quickly able to go in and assess where they're at and what they need to do at any point in time as well. And this goes for a large number of other agencies. So our recommendations to you today is to look at setting up your COVID safe screening forms for your clients and staff, and also visitors and contractors. This will give you the alerts and set yourselves up to meet your key work health and safety obligations to ensure that you keep your agency safe as reasonably practicable from COVID. Next week, we're going to look at what happens if you have a COVID positive person coming in, and also looking at your COVID safe plans and roadmaps out in terms of managing your workplace. As always, we'll open up the phone lines to any questions that you might have. If you are watching this recording after today's live session and want access to the resources, then by all means, please reach out to us either on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Stay safe and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.